Hey guys, it's been a few years since I made my last video. I know in the last one it was kind of a sad tone. I was covering up the Miata after the engine had seized, but luckily for me and unluckily for my friend, he got into a wreck with a reckless driver not too long after, and we were able to salvage the engine from his car. It was a 1.8 liter engine from a 1999 Miata. And if you know anything about Miatas, that they are widely swapped. So yeah, I'm just gonna go over and detail the process of kind of how I did that. I had a 1.6 liter turbo setup using piggyback, basically the Flyin Miata Voodoo box setup. It was called the Voodoo 2 kit back in the day. I'm pretty sure you can get similar O2 signal modifier kits. I know the Car Passion channel, Broken Boosted, they detail like a whole how to do like a piggyback setup and create a cheaper boosted car. And so basically that's what I had. And moving on to the 1.8 liter, I knew it was going to be a big job. I knew I had to swap out the engine. A lot was going to be going on. So I decided to upgrade as well to Megasquirt. And that is a conversion in its own. I mean, I know it's plug and play, but there's still a lot of sensors and stuff that goes on. So I just kind of wanted to detail some of the process of doing both a 1.8 liter swap and a Megasquirt swap at the same time. And also, like I said, I had turbo, and I also have turbo now with the Standalone. And yeah, this might help out some turbo owners as well. So let's just get to it. Alright, so here's the new engine bay. So a couple of reasons, I just want to talk about a couple of reasons why you might want to upgrade. Obviously the 1.8 has a lot more torque. I mean, you can notice it when driving an NB or just even a later NA. It's got a lot more torque. This engine specifically is the BP4W out of the NB1, so 1999 and 2000. And yeah, it's got a lot of torque. It's got variable intake valve system, which we'll talk about later. Variable intake length, sorry. And yeah, the 1.6 liter is just getting a lot more rare, and the 1.8 is just becoming a cheaper and better swap for a lot more people. And hopefully, you know, with some of the stuff I can detail, it makes it a lot easier for some. Alright, so here's some of the steps. First thing you want to do is make sure that you have a Flyin Miata conversion kit, the 1.8 conversion kit. It comes with a lot of useful stuff that you definitely need, like stuff that you wouldn't, I mean, normally be able to fab unless you're like a welder or something. I mean, you got this bracket for to use the 1.6 liter throttle on the 1.8, or I'm sorry, the 1.6 liter or 1.8 liter throttle body. You also got this 1.6 adapter plate that adapts the 1.6 liter throttle body. You can also use a variable TPS if you want to upgrade. You also get the bracket to fit the 1.6 liter coil pack onto the 1.8 liter engine. So just a lot of important little stuff that, like I said, unless you're a fabricator, that you're really going to need. So obviously the first step is going to be to remove the old engine. I have the old engine right here on an engine stand. Luckily I had, like I said, one friend that helped me with getting the new engine out of his old car. I had another one who lent me a crane or a hoist, whatever you want to call it, to get this old engine out. That's my engine stand, so that's been there for a while. But and then I also had another one that helped me kind of swap the engine. I mean, he had general car knowledge, but I was kind of the Miata guy. So I mean, you know, you got to know a lot, but if you got the right hands and the right information, and you use the forums and you take your time, you can do this correctly. So yeah, obviously you want to remove the old engine and transmission. It's a lot easier to pull both of them at the same time, because once you pull the old engine, the weight of the transmission on the back, it kind of, come over to the side here for a better example, kind of angles it out, and it perfectly angles it out. It's like Mazda made the perfect weight of the transmission to pull the engine out. Obviously you want to remove the hood, it makes it a lot easier, but yeah. In my case, since I already had a turbo, I already had an upgraded Flyin Miata clutch with the 1.8 liter flywheel. The manual transmissions are all interchangeable, but the flywheel and clutch have to be the same 1.6 or 1.8 liter, as you should know. So I transferred that onto the new engine. I installed the new 1.8 engine in the clutch system, blah blah blah. Installed a new valve cover. If you really want to, you can tear down the whole engine before you put it in and rebuild it. I'm not an expert at that stuff. That kind of scared me. Like I said, this is my first time. This took me a while just to get over the fear of doing a lot of this. So I just did the easy stuff. Just did the valve cover, stuff like that. And transferred over the cam position sensor from the 1.6 liter. Used the extension harness from Flyin Miata there. Then I connected all the, the main wiring harness to all the connections. You got pretty much like it says in the Flyin Miata guide and a lot of the other guides, you want to use the 1.6 liter electronics and all the 1.8 liter mechanical things per se. So you want to transfer over, unplug all the 1.8 liter dummy, like it's not even a real fuel pressure sensor. I'm sorry, a oil pressure sensor. You want to unplug that and put the real one in from the 1.6 liter. It's a lot better. Basically, all the way under the intake manifold, there's the oil pressure sensor, and you want to remove that, and you can tee that off and make a perfect, if my gimbal will help me here, there we go. I went all the way around the back with the oil pressure feed, or the oil feed, all the way up here to the turbo. Next thing, obviously starter. Like I said, the transmissions are interchangeable, but the starter is going to depend on which transmission you use. So I reused the transmission from the 1.6 liter just because it was in better shape than the one that I got, and I tried using the 1.8 liter starter on it because it was in better condition, and it just didn't work. The bracket holes on the starter to fit onto the transmission just aren't the same for the 1.6 and 1.8 liter. So whichever transmission you have, use that kind of starter. Coolant sensors. Let's see here. We got the fan switch right here on the front. We got, I guess if you want to count it, you got this thermostat here, and then you also got the coolant temp sensor in the back. Those are all reused from the 1.6 liter. The coolant temp sensor in the back just works for the dash, by the way. Another note, so this crossover heater pipe, I don't know what you want to call it, that goes to the heater core, comes from the mixing manifold. It's really hard to see under the turbo, but here's the start of the pipe over here, up here. You want to use that from the year of the 1.8 liter car. I tried to use the 1.6 one, it just didn't work. The way that it mounts onto the exhaust manifold bolt is just completely different. I tried bending the pipe, I tried everything. Alright, so this is a little bit out of order, but hopefully you're watching this whole video ahead of time, or else you're kind of screwed. So obviously you want to use the 1.8 liter fuel rail as per a lot of the instructions online, and reuse the 1.6 liter fuel pressure regulator. Got my lines going out underneath the manifold and then coming back, kind of looping around like whoop, and then going into here. Drilled and tapped the oil drain for the new block here, and then obviously just like connect all the turbo stuff like downpipe, wastegate's internal, that's doesn't really need to be connected. I added a boost controller, manual boost controller, just a generic one. The more you learn about boost controllers, they're all just the same stuff. I mean, unless you're going to get an electronic one, and I just have a really simple setup here, so I just got a cheap manual one. Yeah, all the plumbing is basically the same, just kind of intercepted these lines. The line normally goes from here to here, I believe, and then you just kind of intercept that for the Flyin Miata turbo kit, and that's been working just fine. Another thing to mention, I did install a coolant reroute, so it does go around, the coolant return does go around from the back of the head. However, since I have this 1.8 adapter plate for the 1.6 liter throttle, I ran out of room here, so I kind of had to use, I cut this old radiator hose, got this 90-degree elbow off jegs, and then just kind of, did that. But it works. I mean, it works. And eventually, seeing as it's actually pretty easy to program TPS in Megasquirt, I'm probably going to just put the 1.8 liter TPS on there. Yeah, as for the alternator, everybody will say reuse the 1.6 liter alternator because the 1.8 liter alternator will absolutely not work with the 1.6 liter chassis, guys. Do not make this issue. The 1.6 liter alternator, if my verbiage is wrong, correct me, but 1.6 liter alternator is regulated and will, you know, regulate its own voltage and will not fry all your stuff in your chassis, basically. The one thing you do have to do with the 1.8 liter engine, since the alternator normally attaches to the water pump, there's a huge tab that comes off. It's normally back here, but I had to Dremel that off before installing some stuff. Just make sure the metal shavings don't go, you know, in places you don't want it to go. But the 1.6 liter alternator and bracket fit right on there. After that, I just installed the radiator and fans. Got some, you know, wiring and stuff that I hooked up to these extra little brackets, and just try to make it a little cleaner. Otherwise, there'd just be wiring going everywhere. I'm not a professional wirer or electrician by any means, but just try to make it look clean. Obviously, after that, connected all the intake stuff because normally that's just in the way. I got the FM, like I said, the FM Voodoo kit, so I got all the molded silicone lines, so very nice. You know, right here comes out turbo, goes around, intercooler's in the front. I never even removed the intercooler during the whole swap. That thing is just kind of tucked in, out of the way, but like I said, I did remove the radiator. Intake air temperature sensor. So normally you'd have to weld a bung or, you know, drill and tap a bung. The FM kits just have a bung here on the back, so that was that. It was really easy. Wired it in all the way across. Got this ugly kind of looking loom, but it looks better than the bare wires. Wired it all the way back, and then I got this kind of taped up over here, this AFM harness, because you know, you delete the airflow meter and you put in an IAT sensor. So you can just wire in the IAT sensor to the airflow meter harness and you are good to go. At this point, I just double checked all the vacuum lines, all the connections on everything, just try to make sure that stuff wasn't leaking before moving on to starting the car and stuff. So after that, I had the Megasquirt here. It was just kind of sitting here for a while. The Megasquirt plug and play 2. I installed that. As we can see, if I go down into the passenger footwell, it is very ugly looking, but the Megasquirt is down there, wired into the stock harness. I got the vacuum line already there from the Voodoo kit. However, if you want to, you can route a vacuum line either through the firewall here or through the firewall by the driver's side. I have it wired through the firewall. I'm sorry, fed through the firewall on the driver's side, which is probably an inferior setup. Sorry if I'm yelling into the mic right now. It's probably an inferior setup, just because you're increasing the amount of line that the air has to travel through to, you know, reach the map sensor, and it probably increases some sort of lag or whatever. So I'll probably correct that sooner rather than later. Another thing I already kind of had was the AEM air fuel ratio X series gauge / controller. You know, wired that all with the Flyin Miata pod setup. It's going all down. Wired that into the Megasquirt. At this point, I just made sure all the fluids were filled. Obviously, engine oil, transmission oil. Made sure to fill up the top transmission turret as well, where the shifter is. Coolant. You know, making sure to squeeze the lines, making sure to, you know, try to burp out as much air as possible before starting the car the first time. Last thing, it's a little hard to remove this without, I don't know if anybody else has an issue opening this. That's completely stupid, but you can pull the fuel pump relay and then just prime the oil to the turbo safely. One thing I did notice when priming the oil to the turbo with that fuel pump relay out is it made my oil pressure gauge on my dash not work. So I was cranking, and I was like, oh my god, I have no oil pressure. But then I put that back in, pulled the cam position sensor, so that pulled, instead of having, if you pull the fuel pump relay, it'll stop, I believe, it'll stop obviously fuel, but it won't stop the engine from, you know, cranking, etc. But if you pull the cam position sensor, it'll stop fuel and spark, but it won't disable the dash for some reason. I don't know. So yeah, I was basically freaking out. I thought I had no oil pressure, and that was that. last thing, I had to remove the sway bar in order to, make it easier to install certain things. Obviously, the engine. Just wait to torque the sway bar to the end links until the car was on the ground. So yeah, I mean, that was basically it in my case. Like I said, I took a 1.6 liter with a turbo with a piggyback Flyin Miata setup, swapped for this 1.8. I used a lot of the same parts, obviously different exhaust manifold, but same turbo. Everything chassis specific is the same, radiator, etc. Megasquirt's 1.6 liter. I added a Megasquirt. Real quickly, some other options that you wanted to add. Certain things that I could have done that I didn't do because of either cost or just making things easier on myself. Variable TPS, like I said. You could rebuild the complete engine. You could get all new bearings, you could get head gasket, etc. Treasure Coast Miata has a pretty good affordable kit if you want to rebuild your whole engine. Like I said, I went with a manual boost controller, just a generic one. You could go for electronic boost control, wire that straight into Megasquirt. I know there's a lot of options for that. You can do things like boost by gear, etc. Exhaust. I basically have the straight pipe, Flyin Miata downpipe coming out of the turbo, got the O2 sensor in it. The thing sounds freaking wicked. It is way too loud at idle. It does idle a bit high. It idles at about 2,000 RPM, especially when it's warming up, but it's got its warm-up enrichment and stuff tuned. It's got its acceleration enrichment. It's got VE tables tuned. It does need spark table tune though, but yeah, it sounds wicked at idle, and the spool sounds freaking insane. The straight pipe gives it so much better spool than the 1.6 liter exhaust. Before, I was just running the stock 1.6 exhaust, which is quiet as hell, but you can hear all the spool in the world, and that's the only thing you can hear, and I loved it. It was actually pretty sick. But nobody wanted to race me, and it was definitely choking up the turbo a little bit. But now you can tell, especially like I said with the 1.8 liter engine, it's got so much torque. It is so much quicker off the line, and I love it. And it should help it a lot with the flow at the higher end as well. Last option here is your VIX system. That's not only controlled by this here actuator, which, if you blow into this tube, you can hear the butterfly valves open. It'll decrease the runner length at higher RPM, basically with the solenoid here, and it's also vacuum controlled. I don't know how exactly that works, but basically if you want to wire into the solenoid, you can wire it into Megasquirt. It has no polarity, and you can wire it either way into Megasquirt, and basically you want to switch it, I forget on or off, but at 5,500 RPM you can switch over these butterfly valves, and it just gives you a lot better high end, and it also increases the runner length for low end to give you better torque. But right now I don't have it connected, so it's basically in the short position, which is going to increase the high, like I said, increase the high end, but give it worse in the low end. And yeah, it was a big process, and it was combining two, sometimes in some people's case, if you're adding a turbo, 3 conversions at once. You're converting the electronics, you're adding a bunch of new sensors, you're converting the engine, and like I said, sometimes converting to boost as well. So it can be a lot for some people. It was certainly daunting for me. As you can see, it took a few years to get it completely done. The car is in driving condition. I've been driving it around a bit. Yeah, it took a few years to get done. I was just really scared, really nervous. It was my first time for doing a lot of this stuff. Spent a lot of time on the forums, mustered up the strength, and then just did it. And you guys can do it too. So if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get to them. And yeah, thank you guys.